This week in the world of sports, college football's best athletes come together to chase their dreams as they test their mettle, hoping to impress NFL scouts. This is the Monday Report, starting now. All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is Monday, February 23rd, 2026, and this is the Monday Report. I'm your host, H. James K., and today we are going to be preparing for the NFL Scouting Combine. So the NFL Scouting Combine actually begins today with some interviews and that kind of thing where the scouts will come together and interview athletes and talk to them and get to know them, where to kind of gauge athletes' mental, like where they are from a mental standpoint, what's their work ethic, a job interview. Then on the 26th of February, going all the way to March 2nd, you will have the on-field portion of the NFL Combine. The NFL Combine is taking place in Indianapolis, Indiana, with on-field workouts taking place at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis, Indiana. Now, I will say, having been to Lucas Oil Stadium a few times now, it's a beautiful building. It's in a unique part of town. It's not downtown, but it's easy to get to, and it's a big, beautiful stadium with really good facilities. And for the scouting combine, it's big enough that allows them to do all the on-field stuff, and they've got like workspaces to do interviews and television and all that kind of stuff. So they've been going to Lucas Oil Stadium for many, many, many years. And for those who attend the combine, you'll often see NFL coaches and GMs and scouts sitting in the grandstands where, you'd sit for an NFL game, watching the various activities as they go on during the day on the field. And you'll have things like, 40-yard dash, 10-yard shuffle, 3-cone drill, route running, quarterback passing, agility drills, long jump, high jump. They get weighed. So you'll get like, this person is 5'10" and 3/4 inch tall, and they are 215 pounds, even though at college they said that they were 6 foot tall and 220, that kind of thing. And you'll get, arm length, leg length, hand size, all these different things, because, those measurables matter to NFL teams. And we've seen this last year where Will Campbell, the left tackle coming out of LSU, he was dinged because he had short arms. And for a tackle, you want to have longer arms. That way you don't get tied up with the defensive lineman and you can better block. Now, his technique was thought to be good enough that it wouldn't matter, and it largely was. But in the game that counted the most, he gave up like 14 pressures, that being the Super Bowl, and he just was really, really bad. And people said, well, he did have short arms coming out of high school, coming out of college. So, that's the kind of thing that is measured on the field during the on-field drills. And I think the all-time record for the combine is, for the 40-yard time, is 4.22 seconds, I think. Yeah, that sounds about right. And that was a couple of years ago. I wouldn't surprise me if they break the record again. They get faster and faster every year. Anyways, let's talk about some players to watch. Now, some of the players I'm going to mention are the big dogs, the guys, the first-round picks. But a lot of them are not. A lot of these guys are guys who may not get drafted until day 3 or may not get drafted at all. But, excuse me, they're players that I believe people should be watching out for, because I think these are really talented guys who were really good in college and could make a lot of noise in the league if given the chance. First of all, at the quarterback position, we've got Ty Simpson out of Alabama. So Ty Simpson, he's known for excellent footwork, and he's got really consistent throwing motion, and he's got really good pocket movement. He's got all like those prototypical stuff. He was free to make protections at the for adjustment protection adjustments at the line of scrimmage while he was in college. There's a lot of quarterbacks who aren't allowed to just independently make those decisions at the line of scrimmage. Like J.J. McCarthy was, as was Bo Nix, but a guy like Hendon Hooker out of Tennessee wasn't. He would look to the side. He would look to the sideline, get with the protection adjustment. If the coaching staff wanted to give one, then he would give it. He wasn't allowed to make those independent decisions at the line of scrimmage. If there's any knock on Ty Simpson, it's he struggles. Not only does he struggle with consistent pressure, that's a problem, but I think his bigger deficiency is his continued struggles to layer throws in coverage. So he's really good at getting the short stuff. He never ever misses the short stuff. But those intermediate stuff where you got to like throw it over a linebacker's head, but drop it in front of a safety so you can get to a tight end who's running a seam route, that kind of stuff. He can struggle with those more nuanced, layered throws. Now, admittedly, those are high level passing, passes, and those are high level throws. But that is definitely a knock because the really elite guys can just layer, like. A great example of this is Jared Goff. Jared Goff not only is he pretty solid at the deep ball and the short stuff and, being on time and on target, but you'll be surprised how often he'll throw like a ball that's over a linebacker's head to get to Amon-Ra St. Brown in a flat space that's open behind, before the safety kind of thing, to allow Amon-Ra St. Brown to set his feet, catch the ball, turn around, and then make a play to dodge the safety. You'll see that a lot. And that kind of throw is something that Tom Brady was really good at. And, guys like Joe Montana and Steve Young and all those really, the S-tier top of the, best historic guys, they're all good at layering throws and coverage. So that is definitely something Ty Simpson is going to have to work on. Now, admittedly, in this year's class, it's Fernando Mendoza, and then Ty Simpson, and then probably everybody else. And even then, I don't think I would draft Ty Simpson in the first round. Someone might. There's always one guy who has a meteoric rise because of the combine. Maybe it'll be Ty Simpson. We do know that Ty Simpson will be throwing at the combine. These days, the trend is most quarterbacks don't throw at the combine because they're not familiar with the wide receivers, and there's no chemistry, and, you can have days where you're inaccurate where you maybe wouldn't have been. So, but he's going to, and I honestly like it because, yes, if he has a bad showing at the combine throwing, it could sink his draft stock. But if he's like really good, he could be a top 5 pick. Just because someone said, well, look how good he was at the combine. There's potential there. I mean, Zach Wilson, who was a horrible quarterback in college, he threw amazingly well at the combine and he got drafted in the top 5 by the Jets. So there is potential for benefit there. All right, at the running back position, I want to talk about Nicholas Singleton. Now, for those Big Ten fans out there, his name is familiar. He played running back for Penn State. He was part of the running back duo of him and Kaytron Allen. He was the significantly more explosive back of the two. He's got great size. He's over 6 feet tall. He's over 215 pounds. He's got the burst and the size and the weight and the balance, that everything, that kind of thing that you really need. If there was anything to kind of subtract from him, he does lack vision when the hole isn't readily apparent. Like, if there's a highway in front of him that's wide open, yeah, he's going to hit that hole and he's going to make. But say the picture is muddy and there isn't a hole, he can sometimes struggle to make something out of nothing, and he's more of a one cut get downfield kind of running back. So part of that, though, I think is he played for Penn State. Now, James Franklin is a good coach, but his offenses were always dysfunctional. And it's one of these things where I wonder how he would do in a more fluid, explosive, rhythm-based, an actual competent offense. So I really like Nicholas Singleton. I think Nick Singleton is really, really, really good. And while I don't think he's going to be a starting running back at the league level, I think he could be a really solid backup guy that you come in, maybe not as a third down back, but as a change of pace guy. I can definitely see him filling that role because of his size and intangibles and his explosiveness. All right, now at the wide receiver position, I'm not talking about a guy who you're going to be seeing catching 90 passes a year. This is a guy who will never, ever, ever be a 100 catches in a single season kind of guy. He's never going to be your wide receiver one, but Caden Weigand. Caden Weigand played for Iowa. He was a slot receiver. Now, the reason why I'm talking about this guy is because he might be the best punt returner I've seen in a long time. He returned punts for Iowa. He returned kickoffs for Iowa. He played wide. He was their starting wide receiver. He played running back for them. He did it all. He was like Christian McCaffrey, and he averaged 29.8 yards per kick return, which was third in the FBS. I think this is a guy that in these kickoff roles could be really dangerous. He was really good at making people miss, and he's deceptively fast. He's not very big. He's only 5'9" and he's only 196 pounds. So he's not going to be you're not moving this guy to running back. That's what I mean. This isn't a guy who's going to be taking a lot of hits, but he's an okay enough route runner, and he's got deceptive speed, and he's great at special teams, where I can very much see some team drafting this guy in the 4th or 5th round and using him as like a 5th wide receiver and punt return, kick return kind of guy. I can definitely see him being that role just because he's so talented as a kicker returner and punt returner. At the tight end position, let's talk about Lake McCree out of Southern California. So this is a guy who 6'3", 251-ish pounds. He doesn't have the size of an NFL tight end. Just straight up. He's not tall enough. He's not heavy enough. But he had really consistent hands. He never dropped a ball when he was wide open. He's an excellent blocker. He's a very willing blocker. He's willing to get his hand in the dirt and get muddy in the trenches. But he does lack a little bit of size. He does lack size. He's not tall enough. He's not heavy enough. And he's not as fast as you would normally like. But I can see this guy being one of these sneaky guys who you don't really, because there's always those guys who no one ever thinks are going to be great. And then you're like, Puka Nacua. Puka Nacua was not a name that people were even thinking about when he was drafted at wide receiver for the Rams. But he's a star in the league. So I can definitely see Lake McCree being one of these sneaky tight ends that no one really thinks anything of in the moment, but then 2 or 3 years from now, he's kind of exploded onto the scene as this like change of pace tight end kind of guy who makes a really serious effect, who maybe isn't flashy. He's not Travis Kelce or Brock Bowers or any of those guys, but he's someone who, like Brock Wright is for the Lions, where he's a great second tight end who's deceptively good at catching passes and is a willing blocker and is the kind of guy you want in your locker room on your team. I can see Lake McCree being that because he was a deceptively talented playmaker for USC. He was, they were a team that wasn't super physical, but he was pretty physical. So I like him a lot. All right, at offensive lineman, we're going to talk about Emmanuel Pregnon out of Oregon. He played guard in college, and I think he's going to continue to play guard. This is a guy who's big. This is a guy who was a big, beefy dude. He was over 330 pounds. He was, I think, 6'4". He's got excellent hands in run blocking. He's got really good footwork. He's not the fastest off the line. He lacks the quickness. But his use of hands can very much turn the tide and regain the initiative in the blocking. So he's one of these guys, and he plays low to the ground. He's got a lot of power in his legs. So as a very road grading kind of offensive lineman, I think this is a guy who can make a lot of noise. I think you're going to see him get drafted pretty early, definitely within the first 2 rounds. Because everyone wants O-lineman, and he's one of these big, as defenses have gotten more positionless and are doing more to take away the deep ball, and there's more to be gained by running the ball, in the trenches. So guys like him are in increasing demand. So I like him a lot. This is a guy who I've seen Lions fans say, "Oh my gosh, we need to draft Emmanuel Pregnon. He'd be great. He would fix our guard position." Blah 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 blah. I'd love to have him as the Lions, but I don't know if he's going to last that long. Who knows? But he's a really good guard, and I think he's going to go pretty quick. All right, at the defensive line position, let's talk about Deontay Corleone. Or Corleone, I should say. Deontay Corleone. And they call him the Godfather. He played for Cincinnati. He's from Cincinnati, born and raised. This is a guy who plays defensive tackle. Now, he is small in stature, and he has short arms, which means he's very limited in his usefulness. But he does play low, he plays wide, and he's got an excellent base with good footwork, and he's a tenacious run defender. Now, this is a guy that because of his small stature and his short arms, he will not be an effective pass rusher. He just won't. But as a rotational run-stuffing defensive lineman, this is a guy who could be a serious problem. He's got really good He's got a really good balance. He plays low and wide, as I said, so he's a guy who can take up multiple rushing lanes at the same time. He can really command presence in the middle of your defense, even if he is not the guy that you're going to be sending as a pass rush. This is a guy who he'll get maybe 5 sacks his entire career, but he might be a really tenacious run defender, which, depending on the defense you run, might be something that some teams covet. But I love his name, too. Dante Corleone. What a name. But I think this is a guy who can make a lot of noise on as an early day 3 or a late day 2 pick. Late 3rd, early 4th kind of guy who won't be a starter off the bat, but will be one of these sneaky rotational defensive guys that the team's fans know about, but maybe it isn't the most widely recognized. He won't be one of the, he's not going to be Aiden Hutchinson or, any of those kind of guys, a J.J. Watt. He's not going to be one of these like Ndamukong Suh who's, oh, wow, he's such a good... No, he's not going to be that guy. But he's going to be one of these role players who is just quiet and consistent and a bear to move out of the way on the run game. All right, at the linebacker position, let's talk about a much more widely known player. Of course, we're talking about Jacob Rodriguez. Now, Jacob Rodriguez won every linebacker award there is to win in college. He won them after the 2025 season. He was regarded as the absolute best guy at the position in college football in 2025. Yet he's very much flying under the radar in the draft circles. Part of that is because he's not the biggest linebacker we've ever seen, and he's not the fastest linebacker we've ever seen, but he's one of these guys who's just a tenacious defender, and he's willing to get dirty in the trenches. He's a good pass rusher. He's good at punching the ball out. He's very willing to drop back into coverage, both man and zone. He's got a couple of interceptions. He's got some picks and some fumble recoveries. He's got a couple of sacks. He was everything for the Texas Tech defense, and he was the green dot. So this is a guy who was a huge locker room guy and high character, hard worker, and he was just tenacious for their defense. Yet he seems undervalued, and I think that's largely because of measurables. Even though I thought he was an excellent tackler. So this is a guy who, if he has a good showing at the combine, could absolutely move his way up into the late 2nd, early 3rd round, definitely. But I really like Jacob Rodriguez. I was really shocked that he's this. I mean, NFL.com didn't have a draft rating for him. They give guys, it's 5 through 8, with 8 being S tier, best guy at his position, instant superstar, and 5 being, he might get UDFA'd. He might get as an undrafted free agent, but nothing for Jacob Rodriguez, which blew my mind. So look out for this guy because I think he's going to be a star. I had a gut feeling about Jack Campbell and out of Iowa, and when the Lions drafted him, I knew he would be good, and now he's the Lions starting middle linebacker. He's the Lions green dot, so I have a feeling about Jacob Rodriguez. I really, really like this guy, and he's got a great mustache, which always helps. All right, at the defensive back position, we got Michael Taffy out of Texas. Michael Taffy is technically a DB, but he almost played like a hybrid. College football has gone very positionless at the back seven, so he's very much a DB, but he's also kind of a linebacker, and he was very much, he's an excellent communicator. He was the quarterback of the back end of the Texas defense. He definitely needs to gain weight. He's like barely 200 pounds. He's like 5'11". He's definitely too small. And he does lack a little bit of top-end speed, so he might struggle in man coverage. But this is a guy who maybe, you draft him as a linebacker instead of as a DB, and you kind of move him to the outside linebacker spot where his lack of speed can be kind of masked by the fact that he's not taking on Justin Jefferson in man coverage, but he's a high character guy. He was a huge for their locker room, and he was the communicator for the Texas defense, and he was everywhere for them. He was super efficient, and he got a whole bunch of awards, and he's someone I just think is really, really good. All right, and then finally at the for the specialist, I picked Dominic Zvada from Michigan. So Dominic Zvada he was the place kicker for the Michigan Wolverines for 2023, 2024, and 2025. He was okay in 2023 when they won the championship. He was good, but he wasn't great. In 2024, he was rock solid. He went 20 of 21 for his kicks. He was rock solid from short and from distant. And then he had the yips in 2025. As a guy who went to every Michigan home game, he was one of these guys who you're like, oh, are the vibes good? Oh, the vibes are good. Okay, cool. He's good today. But if the vibes were off, he'd miss. And you're like, why are you missing? Now, this is a guy who was rock solid from beyond 50 yards. From 49 to 57 yards, he was rock solid. He was really, really good. But inside 40 yards, he was really just up and down. And there was no explanation because in 24, he was excellent. He was the best kicker in college football. And then he just wasn't in 2025. Now, I wonder if, he was 84% from beyond 50 yards throughout his career, though he did struggle from 40 yards and closer. If he can regain his 2024 form, I think he can make a serious difference at the NFL level. Now, admittedly, what I think is going to happen is he'll probably get drafted in the 6th round, and someone will kick the tires on him, and then they won't like him. And he'll go play in the UFL for a season, and he'll make a 60-yard kick and be really good, and then he'll get signed by an NFL team. I mean, we've seen like 4 guys do this now. So I think that, I have a feeling that's probably going to be his path into stardom, so to speak, in the league. But I always liked him. He was always a guy who I was like, he had a good arm, he had a good leg, and he was pretty accurate. But man, in 25, he was a little up and down. He wasn't bad. He did make 80% of his kicks, but there were some misses where you're like, how did you miss that kick? So Dominic Zvada, place kicker. All right, so that's all the players I have picked out. The last thing I want to talk about is, obviously, as is tradition, NFL Network and ESPN guy and, Rich Eisen, talk show host Rich Eisen, he does his Run, Rich, Run thing for charity I think it's for a children's hospital. I think it's for St. Jude's, and where he runs the 40-yard dash in his suit with his tie and here's hoping he can, run inside 6 seconds. But he raises charity, and you can, post yourself running your own 40-yard dash time with hashtag Run Rich Run. So, I always love Run Rich Run. So he'll do that at the Combine this year. So watch that. I don't know when he'll do that, but he'll do it eventually. All right, so I think this is going to be a much shorter one. We're kind of getting back to this kind of format. For those of you listening on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and everywhere else that podcasts are available, thank you. For those of you watching on YouTube, please consider liking, subscribing, hit the bell icon to get notifications, and leave a comment to feed the algorithm. Next week, we'll see where we are. Maybe we'll talk about Formula One. Maybe it's going to be IndyCar. It's probably going to be IndyCar, but we'll see. I've got to plan out what I'm going to do. Last year at this time I had a whole plan of in advance what I was going to talk about for episodes that made my life easier. Maybe I'll do that again. Either way, my name is H. James K. Thank y'all for tuning in. Until next time.